What would you do if a young person humiliated you simply because of the color of your skin? And what if, after laughing at you, something inside them began to change? This is the story of an old man who not only claimed what belonged to him, but also left an unforgettable lesson. Are you brave enough to hear it? The air in the bank was thick with palpable tension. The clocks on the walls, as impatient as the rest of those present, ticked away the time slowly, but the old man knew his time in this world was not infinite. His skin, as dark as the moonless night, reflected the marks of a harsh life, of long battles in a country that had never let him forget his color. The sound of his cane echoed on the marble floor as he walked toward the counter, where a young employee watched him with a condescending look. The old man, dressed in a worn hat and a suit that, though somewhat worn, showed dignity, placed an envelope on the counter. The young man, about 20 years old, looked up with a mix of indifference and a hint of discomfort, but quickly regained his disdainful attitude. "How can I help you, Grandpa?" said the employee, not even looking him in the eyes, his voice full of an arrogance that seemed to come from a deep place of contempt. The old man, with a calm that contrasted with the young man's aggression, pointed to the envelope and said, "I'm here to claim what is mine." The young man furrowed his brow and, without hesitation, began to laugh, a mocking laugh that rose above the murmur of the other customers in the room. "Really?" he said, looking at the envelope as if it were a bad joke. "And what do you think you're going to do with this, old man? This is a bank, not a place to claim fantasies." The old man didn't react to the sarcastic tone, but remained silent, waiting for the young man to finish. Seeing that the young man wouldn't stop, he slowly took out a yellow document, almost disintegrated by time, and slid it to the front of the counter. "This is mine. The deed is in my name, and it has been in my family for generations. I'm not here for fun." The young man, with a mix of disbelief and amusement, glanced at the paper and leaned back in his chair. "You really expect us to believe this?" He laughed again. "This paper is worthless now, and if you think you're going to get anything from me, forget it. Who do you think you are, old man?" The old man raised his head and looked the young man in the eyes for the first time. In his eyes, there was deep sadness, but also a strength that had survived centuries of humiliation, of invisible blows that never ceased. "I'm nothing more than a man who has fought for his life. I'm not your grandpa or your old man. I'm the owner of this land, even if that means nothing to you," he said, his voice deep, filled with a calmness that only years and deep wounds can give. The young man stared at him, and for a moment, the contempt faded, even if only for a second. But it wasn't enough to change the course of the conversation. "You can't claim something that no longer exists," the young man replied, his voice lower now, but still full of disdain. "Properties like yours are from the past, old man. Times have changed." The old man said nothing more. He turned around and left the bank, with the same calm he had arrived with, although the weight of the humiliation made him feel lonelier than ever. Outside, the sun blazed down on the city, but he didn't feel the heat. His mind was absorbed in a place where only he and the memory of his ancestors existed. The young man, as he watched him leave, felt a small spark of doubt, but quickly extinguished it. What could that man, that claim, possibly mean? He didn't understand it, but somehow, in his heart, something told him there was something bigger, something deeper than any paper he could show him. And so, the old man left, while the young man stayed, wondering why something as simple as an old title of ownership seemed so important to a man who had nothing left but his dignity. The old man walked slowly toward the bank's door, head held high, but his steps no longer had the firmness they had when he entered. The young employee stayed watching him, and as the man walked away, he couldn't help but let out one last laugh. "Incredible! What madness!" he said loud enough for the old man to hear from the entrance. "Come back when you fall off your cloud, Grandpa." But the old man didn't respond. His face, hardened by years and struggles, became even more serious. He didn't need answers, didn't need confrontation. He had lived his entire life dealing with looks like that, with gestures like the young man's, with poisonous words that reminded him that for many, his color and his history meant nothing. Inside the bank, some customers turned to watch the scene, but most just shrugged. Society's indifference was the greatest of punishments. Racism was no longer just a visible act, but an atmosphere that could be breathed in with every breath, with every unnoticed action, like a disease that corrupts the roots of everything it touches. The young employee, seeing there was no reaction from the old man, allowed himself a satisfied smile. He felt he had one, that he had made it clear that in his world, the powerful made the rules, those who were in control, those who weren't impressed by old pieces of property paper. To him, the old man was nothing but a shadow of the past, something that had been left behind and didn't deserve a place in the present. Suddenly, the phone at the counter rang, cutting the uncomfortable silence left after the old man's departure. The young man quickly answered, without losing his attitude. "Yes, sir. Sure, no problem." He hung up and turned to his colleagues, laughing under his breath. The guy thought he was going to impress me with a piece of old paper. How ridiculous. But deep inside, something didn't feel right. Though he tried to suppress it, an unease ran down his spine. It wasn't a feeling of guilt, but rather a simple yet annoying perception that maybe not everything was as simple as he had thought. Meanwhile, the old man continued on his way, unhurried, as if none of what had happened mattered. He knew that in this struggle, like many others he had faced, the victory was not in the bank, nor in what the young man thought of him. The real victory, in his mind, was much deeper. It was the resistance, the ability to maintain dignity in front of those who try to take it away. When he arrived home, the afternoon heat enveloped him. He entered calmly, without making a sound. He sat in his usual chair, in front of a table where an old photograph of his family, his parents, his grandmother, still rested. Everything he had lived and everything he still had to fight for remained there, in his mind and in his heart. There was no immediate answer, no visible justice at that moment. But in his soul, he knew that stories like his never completely fade, that time has a strange way of returning what has been lost. And although it wasn't today or tomorrow, he knew that one day the truth would come to light, much greater and more powerful than the disdain he had faced. And as he sat there, in his silent home, he looked out the window where the sun was bidding farewell to the day. The afternoon heat was heavy, but his thoughts remained clear. The fight was not over. That same night, as the young employee returned home, he couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The laugh he had let out, the way he had belittled the old man. Something was nagging at him inside, like a small thorn he couldn't remove. He threw himself onto his bed, but instead of relaxing, his thoughts assaulted him. The image of the old man, his gaze fixed and full of history, came back again and again. The disdain with which he had treated him now seemed strange, as if he had crossed an invisible line, something that couldn't be erased so easily. He tried to leave it behind, but he couldn't. That very night, he dreamt of him, of his face marked by years and hardships, his dignity intact. The next day, the young man woke up with an uncomfortable feeling, as if something was wrong, as if the words and actions he had taken the day before were a nightmare from which he couldn't wake up. He decided he had to do something that would free him from that guilt that he couldn't get rid of from his chest. After work, he headed to the bank, determined to find the old man. He walked through the streets, searching for his face among the crowd, but he didn't know where to find him. What he did know was that he couldn't carry the weight of that contemptuous attitude. He wanted to make it right. Finally, after several hours, he saw him, walking slowly as always, with his cane. The young man approached him, almost timidly. "Sorry," he said, his voice wavering. "I want to apologize. Yesterday, I treated you badly. I didn't value you, and I'm really sorry." The old man looked at him with surprise, but his face showed no anger, only a deep calm, as if he knew this moment might come. He didn't respond immediately, and the young man, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, felt a mix of shame and relief. "You don't have to apologize," the old man said, in a soft voice. "The world is what it is, but it's good that you recognized what you did. Not everyone has that ability." The young man stood there, not knowing what else to say. The old man's sincerity, his nobility, had moved him in a way he didn't fully understand, but couldn't ignore. He had learned a lesson greater than any punishment. With one last sigh of gratitude and shame, the young man said goodbye. "Thank you. I promise I'll do better." And as he watched the old man walk away, he understood that there was something more powerful than racism and disdain: genuine remorse, the ability to recognize mistakes, and the courage to correct them. With that thought, the young man walked away, knowing that, although the damage couldn't be completely undone, that small action could be the beginning of change, both for him and for others. The old man, for his part, continued on his way, a slight smile on his lips. Maybe he didn't always win, but he knew that the small victories, those that happen in the hearts of people, are the most powerful. The end.